Good morning and happy Labor Day. This is ASMM Digital Small Business Connections, and we are the entrepreneur for, sorry, we're the podcast. I got distracted because I'm getting an echo back suddenly. We are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. My idea was to give you something where we talk to entrepreneurs and you can learn from them. So you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. You can learn from other people's mistakes. You can learn from their wisdom. And I want to give you something you can walk away with. So today we have Kenneth Kenney. He is from a podcast called A Shark's Perspective, and he's going to talk to us a lot about advertising and marketing and bringing it all together. So before we get started, I want to remind you that you can subscribe on YouTube. That helps us a lot. We are not quite up to 1,000 subscribers over there. And once we hit 1,000, that helps me a whole lot. I also want to remind you, we're streaming live. I tell you this every single time, and I stress it every single time, because you have experts on the show. You have people who know a lot more than I know. You have people who know a lot more than you know. So ask them questions. We're live. You might as well do that. You can do that on any of the platforms. We get the information here and we can answer the question live while we're going. So please do. Another reminder that it is National Suicide Prevention Month. And if you are struggling, please ask for help. We do this because we talk about this because we also run the charity Burgers and Bands for Suicide Prevention, and we are here to help you if you need it. We can give you guidance on what to do next. But if you want to support our cause, go to burgersandbands.org. You can donate there. You can share our information. You can just see what we're all about. But it's National Suicide Prevention Month, and it's a great time to do that. Let me introduce you to Kenneth Kenney, and I want to tell you a little story before I do. Kenneth is one of the few guests that I have actually met in real life. And it happened at the Digital Summit a couple of years ago. And I've been on his podcast. I listen to him. I feel like I know you well because I listen to your podcast every week. So welcome to the show. Hold on one second. There you go.
All right, perfect. So thank you again for mentioning National Suicide Prevention Month. And I always tell people all the time, make sure to remember the number 1-800-LISTEN, which is how we we met at a digital summit in Philadelphia. Right. And then you were on my show on episode 71. And we talked a lot about social media, but we also the backstory was, the issues that people suffer through with depression and everything else. So it was honestly a real pleasure to meet you. And that's how we connected and had some great conversation, and glad to be back on this show.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you. I have a question for you.
Sure.
You said diving with sharks before we came on. You said diving with sharks, and it had not occurred to me that was why you have Kenneth the Shark Kenney. So tell us about that.
I'm a shark fanatic. I encountered a shark very, very early on in the wild, and sort of found my spirit animal, if you will. And so I have been enamored with sharks. I have a real passion for them. My nickname has been Shark throughout much of my life. My son calls me Shark. My close friends call me Shark. And so when I started the show, I knew I wanted to kind of play into my own brand. And so it's something I passionately love to do. I've done it several times this year. COVID's obviously had an impact, but I try to swim with sharks in the wild as frequently as I can, either free diving or snorkeling. So that's why it's called A Shark's Perspective.
Okay. That is great. I love that you were able to pull that in. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite things to do is to go down to Florida in particular, where you can encounter a lot of large sharks, especially often in the northeast part of Florida, close to Jupiter, or between Jupiter and Daytona. But I remember one of my last trips I took, I flew down to swim with sharks, and this was during the height of the Florida pandemic with everything going on. And my wife wasn't in the least bit afraid of me swimming with sharks because I've done it, hundreds of times in my life. What she was worried about was all the people who were coughing and sneezing on the plane. So she wanted me to wear like a hazmat suit. So that was just sort of the fun, and odd times we live in. So.
Exactly. Yeah, we definitely live in odd times right now. So your background, though, is in advertising and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So I got a couple of gray hairs, which means I've been able to, look at things. And again, it's part of the reason why I named my own show A Shark's Perspective. I've worked for a publisher. I've worked multiple times. I've worked in radio and TV on air. I've been, I don't look like it now, but I was on TV at one point. But I've worked for agency several times. I've worked in the consulting business several times. I've worked for brands several times. So, and I've been a solopreneur and entrepreneur several times. So taking all of those pieces in has helped me has helped enlighten, I guess, a little bit of my viewpoint, not looking at it strictly from one perspective, which so many people get siloed in their way of thinking. And I tend to think anytime I'm thinking about it, especially from a customer's view, is how do all those things sort of come together. So that's a lot of why I talk a little bit about holistic marketing often, about how to pull all the pieces in together, because that's really what the customer sees. They're not dissecting, what you're doing. So a lot of times, even when I've worked at a brand, I've worked for large national brands and small brands, I sometimes put on my agency hat. And when I'm at an agency, sometimes I put on my brand hat and sort of play devil's advocate, if you will, to try to help argue a lot of those things to make us better marketers. And so having worked in advertising now for a great agency called AI Media Group, we have a patented attribution technology. So that allows us to see a lot of the touch points across the entire advertising journey and part of the web journey as well. So, we kind of look at channels, if you will, agnostically, because the customer looks at it that way.
Right, exactly. So, well, let's dive into that a little bit, into the marketing and advertising holistically, and what that means. One of the things I was thinking about before we got on is, and I love Mark Schaefer. I think Mark Schaefer is wonderful. But one of the things he said is loyalty is dead. And I said to my son, it came up because I knew you were coming on, and because at the same time he looked in my fridge. He doesn't live here. He spent the night here. And he looked in the fridge and he said, "Oh, you have a whole different jam in here." And I said, "Yeah, because they're not carrying my jam at the store anymore." And I was like, wait a second. So loyalty is not dead. I mean, I am very loyal to the brands that we're with, but talk a little bit about that, about marketing and advertising holistically here.
Yeah, no. So, and Mark Schaefer's brilliant. Mark, his book, Marketing Rebellion, is fantastic, but I'm actually working on my own book, and Mark has several books that are really good, but I'm actually working on my own book that sort of plays into that same line of thought you just brought up, called We Care-ish. And I don't think marketers and advertisers so often scream about trying to make us fans, trying to do all this stuff they think will make us fans and adore them. But so often brands completely blow it. And so we've seen this, especially with the pandemic, with a lot of the messaging that comes through. And it's gotten to a point where, you really think about, you want to believe that a lot of people are indeed your fans, but they care a little bit. I sort of say it's, kind of sarcastically, a consumer saying, we care-ish. And also a lot of the C-level people come out and recite stuff that's written by their communications team, and it feels like they're saying we care-ish. A lot of the things that they preach about how much they care about you is often not true. And it's, consumers have become so much more sophisticated today that they really see through a lot of that. So that's why I'm aggressively working on that. And I don't think enough people really think about the holistic thing. It's not just your Instagram channel. It's not just your search results that come through with organic, with a well-written blog. It's not just how well your ads play. It could be that the level of service you perform, regardless how great your marketing advertising is, completely blows it and kills it. So it's really looking at a lot of that holistic strategy for a brand. And that's easier talked about than done, because most brands are not doing it well, especially today.
Oh yeah. Well, and when you start talking about small businesses, really small businesses, it's hard for them to understand. So we talk in our business, one of the things that we do that we think is really different is we don't just market you on social media. We look at a bigger picture, and that may mean calling you and saying, "Hey, Severna Park High School needs this thing. We think you could give them," and that would help you market to their parents. It seems like a small thing, but it actually is, for a small business, really big.
Absolutely. It's enormous. And it's one of the things that really either slows down or stops small businesses from being able to scale successfully. They stop growing because the moment they go chasing away from customer experience and that holistic view, it can really kill them. And then it becomes sort of a sales oriented strategy only. And I'm a big proponent of growth. That's what I speak about a majority of the time. But really understanding how customer experience plays into a growth strategy is really important, because the moment you take, you think about a small business. Why do I go to a small business instead of a large brand? Maybe it's the only one that's close to me. But another big part of that is because they work specifically on my problem as a consumer. And it's that
Right.
way for everybody with every kind of product or service. The moment that they start to take their eyes off the ball as me as a customer is the
Right.
moment they start to lose my business. And then it tends to sort of compound more and more and more after that.
Yeah, well, and I think what happens with small businesses in particular is they are small, and
Mm.
so they keep trying new things. They're like, we want to grow, but then
Well, they chase
suddenly they
after the bright, shiny object.
exactly, and then they forget that what built them in the first place were the relationships they built.
Mhm.
So we one of the next steps for us is always to say, okay, we're going to do this social media part of it, but you have to do this networking part, and we'll help
Exactly.
you. Right? It sounds silly because we're a marketing company, but we're like, no, 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 and a networking company. We want to introduce you to the people who are going to help build your small brand. And a lot of the people who are listening to this are those people who started as solopreneurs and are now entrepreneurs and are growing, but they need that. You need those extra, that extra step of creating those relationships.
Yeah, a buddy of mine and I were talking about, so many people just overly get focused on, how do I build out this amazing TikTok channel, without thinking
Right.
about how it's actually going to benefit the customer or consumer who's watching it and considering your product or service. I mean, we don't need, your local accounting firm to necessarily get too drawn in by figuring out how to shuffle dance,
Right.
or solving a Rubik's cube quickly. That's not really going to draw you in as a longtime consumer. It may get some attention early on, but focusing on the rest of that experience and the journey along the way is incredibly important. And I think it gets missed so often.
Absolutely. One of the things that I know, this is such a small thing, but it's something I am like just really focused in on. The number of times people don't put their phone number in a place that makes it easy for somebody to dial.
Oh, this just happened to me yesterday with an order that I got from a restaurant, from a takeout. And it drives me absolutely crazy. One of the stories that I'll be using on stage, I didn't even know you were going to bring this up, but I had some Canada Dry ginger ale that was sitting in my closet probably too long. And I tried to find the phone number for Canada Dry to figure out what this obscure code was on the bottom of the can. I've got it here because I've been
Right.
keeping it as a reminder. But the code is not a time date stamp anymore. It's this obscure code. So I go look at their website. I could have just thrown it away, but I had a whole case that had been sitting in the closet too long. I could not find any explanation. There was a bunch of stuff on the internet about how it was hard to find anymore. I called them. I sat on hold, and I sort of just thought about it as I'm writing up a story for a chapter in the book, that I decided to wait on hold for a while, just listen to music in the background. They got to me with an operator. She transferred me around, and you could hear the phone starting to reach different people. Like, was never connecting with somebody who could help tell me what it actually meant. And
Right.
most of the time, I actually had to call a second number, because the first number that they had on display was not the one that was actually for customer service, even though that's what it said. So it becomes such a chase.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And so people are afraid to do that because they're afraid they're going to lose customers a lot of times. Not Canada Dry, but I've worked with brands who are afraid to put out phone numbers on display because they're afraid to lose customers. If they just focus a little bit on improving the experience, they could, you might have a lot more fans than just people that want to cancel.
Absolutely. Well, and that's exactly how I feel, is that a lot of times we have people who put something out there and they're like, give us a call.
Yeah.
And then, or go to the website.
Yeah.
But what is the website? And so I'd say, for my team, I tell them, I'm like, take your phone, put some things on your clipboard that when you say, hey, here's our website, and we do it for burgers and bands in particular, here's our website, go here to donate. Text it to them. So all they have to do is click. What is the easiest thing you can do for your customers? And it seems small, that phone number, right? But there are so many other things that are very similar. I think it's that first step. If you're
Yeah.
thinking of those small things, it's going to help with your customer experience.
Well, I worked for a company one time, and I ended up canceling their service. And when I was there, I was doing it while I was at work in the morning, sort of before a lot of people had come in. And I was having a hard time finding the number on the site to cancel it. I probably wasted, an hour looking for this in 5,000 different places and couldn't find it. Didn't want to really scream to everybody that I wanted to cancel service. Where's the number? I ended up just walking down the hall to the customer service team on another floor and asked them to cancel it. That sadly was the easiest path for me, somebody working in the same building, but for 99.99% of the people, they would have gotten just as frustrated as I did.
Right. And then they don't just want to cancel it, but they never want to use you again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So small businesses can, if they're accessible, that can really create an amazing opportunity for them to be able to connect with customers, not just put something out there where people are going to cancel.
Absolutely. Well, I told somebody, I tell this story all the time. It's my favorite story. I had a client call me one day, he's now a client, but when he first called me, the first time he called, he said, so how much do you charge to do social media? And I told him, and he says, that's way more than I'm paying right now. And I said, yeah, I said, but it's what I have to charge. And it's, and it's definitely worth it. We do a really good job, but we are very in depth, and that's how we have to charge. And he goes, I think it's too expensive. I said, well, I'm so sorry. I said, if you change your mind, call us back, or if there's anything else we can do. And he saes, okay. About 2 weeks later, he calls me back and he says, hey, can you tell me again what I get for that amount? And I told him, and he says, God, I just don't know. And I'll throw GoDaddy under the bus. He's like, GoDaddy charges me like a lot less than that. And I said, okay. I said, I understand that. Keep using them. I totally understand it. So he calls me back a third time about a month later, and he says, all right, I want to go ahead and sign with you. And I said, awesome, that's great. I said, so why? What changed your mind? I'm so sorry, the dog's going to bark. Can you get him? Sorry, somebody's walking through the house and the dog is barking. I said, so what changed your mind? And he says, well, you answered the phone 3 times in that period of time, and GoDaddy has yet to do it. Oh, no. And I've called them every day since. So that customer experience matters.
Even during a pandemic. I mean, we've seen people get furloughed. We've seen people have to shift to work from home. Your customers don't care. I mean, no. They understand. We understand what's going on in the world today, but regardless how much that's changed, somebody can get on the phone from home and connect through the internet. It's not customer service and experience shouldn't really fall off a cliff just because you can't figure out logistics within your company of where to get people to VPN in to a server.
Right.
I mean, this is
exactly
not the end of the world. So people have really got to start stepping up the game because too many people are leaving companies. And honestly, I looked at it from a lead gen standpoint. What I was talking about all the time was using different marketing and advertising tactics and strategies to really drive in traffic. But a lot of what has shifted in the last decade is that customers are leaving companies because of it. And it's become, as much as anything, a real growth strategy that people need to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I want to talk, because I'm really interested. One of your things you said, I want to talk about the convergence of TV and digital marketing. And it is not even something that has been on my radar. So I'm really interested to hear what you say.
Well, it's one of my favorite topics when I speak at Digital Summit. Oddly enough, I didn't speak when we met, but I've got a heavy background in both digital marketing and TV. I worked pretty heavily in addressable TV for a national data supplier and worked with all the I was driving a big chunk of the addressable TV population. So I really started looking at a lot more of the back end data and delivery with the major publishers. What's happened now is I have so much more opportunity today to advertise leveraging data on TV and being able to recognize it very similarly to where we look at it with digital media. For example, TV can be delivered through a connected TV device, something like either it's PlayStation, your Samsung Smart TV, any other, a Roku stick. I mean, any of these different items. And now there's data for me to be able to addressably target, even at the local level, especially with OTT, being able to over the top advertising, over the top TV, but being able to target those customers and not necessarily retarget them. That's the goal, is not to show them an ad and then retarget them, 50 ways to Sunday, but being able to bring in one of the most important channels. And again, I look at TV the same as I do video. Video has moved into the digital vernacular, if you will. But if I watch TV on a 65-inch laptop made by Samsung, it's still TV. So Netflix may be considered video, but it's still delivered for the most part on a TV. It's also delivered on other devices, cross-screen devices like a phone or a tablet. But what I'm able to do now is deliver a lot more addressable ads through traditional television or linear supported, data-driven linear, or being able to target through over the top advertising, and being able to take data and target people either at a household on an addressable standpoint, or that's focused on, say, you, the user, where I can reach you and your son or anybody else in that household, as well as also being able to target and create a footprint where we're delivering that to a specific device. But holistically, again, that's why I say you don't necessarily need to focus on just social or just one channel. It's not focusing on just TV. It's focusing on being able to leverage that data together,
right,
and be able to target people, if you will, to find the people that are buying your product and spend your money more wisely. Now you're able to do that better with data at a much more affordable way. I mean, you can do an addressable TV campaign for $100,000. You can do an OTT campaign, which has a smaller reach, but for a lot of people at the local level, you can do that for $5,000 or, in that ballpark range, and reach an audience. So TV used to be a brand only channel in a lot of the conversations we would have, just done for brand awareness. But now you're able, even at the small business level, to be able to target people with a $5,000 buy, people that are more likely to maybe buy a car or go to restaurants or whatever, be at a certain age range or gender, or there's so many different audience propensity models that companies can use to build the right targeted audience. But really understanding where TV and digital play together as well is such an important part of your advertising dollar mix. And in today's world, especially with what we're going through, you have to look at the ROI of your media spend. And Google gifted the world, I would say, one of the greatest attribution technologies in the world with Google Analytics. But customers, again, look at more than just your website and just Google. So all of these things start to work together. TV is a big component of that. So it's really integrating that in, and it's kind of hard to go into that here and not spend 12 hours on it for something I used to spend 80 hours a week on. But understanding that they have the capabilities to work together, to leverage a similar to same data set, to use audience propensity models with targeted segments and persona. You're building your personas of what you think your customers are, but then taking that a step further with actual segments to deliver targeted media delivery is really an important component. And it gives you now the capabilities to do that in quicker time with OTT. If I want to do a social campaign, I log into Facebook, I'm off to the races within a day.
Right.
TV traditionally used to be, with an addressable TV campaign, it used to be 2 to 3 weeks out and months of planning before, and then you have to get back in data from the boxes before. That's what I used to do. And that could be a 30, 60, 90-day process after the campaign to see what the ROI was. People don't have the patience for that and haven't for a long time. So how do you do that and really not also just get the ROI on the back end of how they converted, but what do you need to use with a TV ad to optimize where you're performing well in social? Becomes really a conversation that people can have more holistically. How do all the channels work together is extremely important.
Right.
That was a
Right.
lot for a couple.
That is a lot. That is a lot though. But it is funny because I think many people think that TV is outside their range, and it's maybe even not relevant anymore. And it's so not true.
Not at all. No. And the numbers did cut. I've worked heavily with the publishers for years. I have a lot of them that I call friends and have stayed with them during this pandemic in particular. But they, the cord cutting conversations we were having were a little too grandiose in 2019 and before. Although it was shifting, it was not shifting dramatically. We're starting to see a lot more of that shift in 2020 and beyond. We're starting to
Right.
see a lot of the cord shaving as well. I mean, you had 30% of the workforce that was, lost their jobs during the pandemic. The bundle of 5 million channels you had on DirecTV or Comcast wasn't as relevant as it was before. But for an
Right.
advertiser or marketer, you really need to figure out where you're going to reach those people. And not everybody was strictly looking at Instagram, and not everybody was getting every bit of news delivered to them on Twitter. I mean,
Right.
TV still plays a massive component. Looking at your old rabbit ears version, if you will, linear TV, that sort of TV is continuing to die, and it's continuing to die a little more quickly. But if you want to reach uh, the scale, TV is still a massive component to reach a lot more than what could go viral with one ad for 2 seconds on, Facebook.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're,
And
you're
all
absolutely
the
right.
proof you need is to turn your TV ads off to see when the phones don't ring. That's generally what happens. Small and big
Yeah.
brands.
Yep. Yeah, and we see that. You see that with digital as well, though, right? You see somebody who says, "Oh, I don't think it's working." No matter what you show them, I don't think it's working. And as soon as they turn it off, they're like, "So I think we need to start again." Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly.
Absolutely. So, all right, well, let's talk about, you went into Google Analytics a little bit. So talk about understanding attribution today. Why this is important for any business, whether you're a small business or a medium business or, a gigantic industry.
Yeah. So for the most part, people look at attribution, and understandably, from a media modeling mixed. It's through modeled attribution. You try to attribute a certain form of your media spin to what you believe will work. Well, media models in 2019, again, were best guesses, and some of them perform well, but generally you tweak the model and you think that, based on results you've seen in touch points that you can recognize, you think you'll put 25% towards this channel and 12% of your spend towards this channel, and so on and so forth. Well, if you look at 2020 and the fact that people aren't consuming media nearly the way that they used to be because of the pandemic as well. People have been shut-ins for a good 6 months for most parts of the northern half of the country. You're watching a lot more TV, for example, than maybe you were I'm definitely watching a lot more Netflix and
Oh yeah.
TikTok than I used to. But if you think about where media is delivered, there's been a dramatic change over this year. Podcasts, for example, the listenership fell off a proverbial cliff earlier in the year because people weren't commuting to work.
Right.
Now, if you'd allocated all your dollars that way, that's one thing. And so people then often look at their Google Analytics, which does incredibly good job of telling you how you perform on Google, excuse me, and how you perform on your own organic site and with inputs from other channels. But so much of attribution for most people is done with last click. But when I talked about TV and digital, for example, how did that TV ad, or how does your social media dollars, if you look at it that way, that Facebook or Instagram story that you created that told a great message about a brand, how does that play in the middle of the customer journey? And so I had worked with a media company that had a patented attribution technology, and I really fell in love with the technology and went to work for them. And so now we're able to view, and I'm not doing a sales pitch, but I'm just telling you, I was able to look at the full journey across where conversion touch points were. And so often I would see the same thing. First click, they saw it on Google. Maybe they did some research. Last click, they converted on Google, but maybe they saw a TV ad that was delivered through a connected OTT type device. Maybe they saw a social media campaign that you had done for that same brand. Maybe they read 3 organic blog posts. Understanding that full journey for most people because is generally done very well at the organic level and with Google, but
Right.
they, Google shouldn't and doesn't tell a great story of how well Facebook, for example, performed. Why? Because they're competing for those same dollars.
Right.
TV has not had the technology and data behind it 5 years ago to really be able to tell that story. Now it does. So being able to do all of those things together to tell a better conversation of where it fits into the journey is what we're able to do and recognize. And so that has really opened up a lot of my eyes to the things I believed. I'm now able to recognize a lot of the touch points. But also, when you think of the modeling mix as being wrong, it also helps you understand as a marketer that advertising can drive a lot of traffic. I know Mark Schaefer, I think I've joked with him before in the past about advertising, because a lot of people aren't the biggest proponents of it, but in today's world, you really have to interrupt with a lot of the advertising. And if you can afford to, and understand that it plays a larger part of a customer journey, that's not
Right.
just on one channel. And whether you live on Instagram all day or a lot, there's a pretty good chance you probably saw something on the Google machine or your TV or your laptop or whatever that came through multiple different sources. And we used to always say that it was 7 touch points, to 7 touches to get somebody to convert. My belief, and I've seen, has been it's a lot more. There's a lot more noise out there that we're consuming. It's not just 7 touch points. And so
Absolutely.
they come from all different mixes. And Mary Meeker, back in 2019, introduced her big Meeker report every year. And she showed that like 88% of the people watching TV were using another device at the time. So if you think about it this way, this is the easiest example I use on stage a lot to show the journey. If you're seeing a TV ad for somebody, whether it's on your TV, your phone, or your laptop or iPad, and you see an ad that triggers you, and let's make it fun. Let's not make it for to go buy a car or something, but let's say
Right.
go see a movie. Where are you going to go look up information about where to go watch that movie or see that movie or buy that car or go get a pizza or whatever? It's on
Right.
your phone. And so what happens all the time for most people is then they attribute more they attribute more worth to where it converted off of the phone. However,
Right.
know that that TV ad, or at least we believe that TV ad helped convert it. And so really now when you start realizing that that touch point had an influence on another touch point, and you're able to recognize all the points of the journey, it can also help you allocate more money towards the channels that drive traffic, not just the one that's the most recognizable. So that's always really important to me. And that's what a lot of what we focus on today.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you, so I'm going to tell you a story. My first customer I lost. The
Yeah.
first customer I ever lost actually happened to be the first customer I got. And he came back after I lost him because he said to me, I get more people who come from the sign that's placed by the road than
Yeah.
I do from
Oh, yeah.
Facebook.
I love the
And I'm
billboard.
like, and I'm like, that's awesome. I said, but let's talk about it. I said, so who are the people who you've gotten from that sign? And he showed me, and I said, okay, so let's go back and look at your Facebook in particular, because I knew this ahead of time. I could tell.
Mhm.
I'm like, let's look at your Facebook in particular and who's engaging with you on Facebook and how long they've been engaging. And almost every one of those people who had said, oh, I came because I saw your sign by the
Mhm.
road, originally started on Facebook. So it
Absolutely.
is that thing
It,
you have to think, just because somebody finds you, they call you on Google, doesn't mean, or your Google ad, doesn't mean that that's where they found you.
I've worked with a ton of colleges, universities in my career. And one of the things that used to drive me the craziest was the survey where they say, where did you hear from us? And a lot of brands do this. It is the worst method on the planet. And I would
Yeah.
trust Google Analytics even any day over somebody's memory. Is it this big giant sign that was right out the door when I drove in, or was it a Facebook ad I saw? Odds are it's the Facebook ad that triggered me to recognize the billboard. But it's all of them work together, and just knowing how to efficiently manage that and then optimize during a campaign is what's going to help you really recognize double-digit growth. It's not jumping into some siloed strategy. It's not, it's like you talked about, it's a social strategy, but it's social plus the other components, a bigger picture of things.
Absolutely. Actually, so if you look at my logo, it's on the screen here. And if you guys are listening to this on the podcast, you can't see it, but it's a big swirl. And people
That way.
sometimes hate the swirl. They really oftentimes hate the swirl, but because people not like people who are designing, so graphics, if they want to put it on something, they're like, it's really difficult to put on something. But I love it. And the reason we designed it this way is because I talk with my hands a lot, and I say, you have to do TV, and you have to do paper, the local newspaper, and you have to do networking, and you have to mix it all together like a soup.
You look like you're waxing on, waxing off.
Waxing, exactly. But that's how I talk. And I'm like, it is. So when I had them design it, I'm like, if you can design anything, I want it to look like a soup pot where everything's getting mixed together. And that's how you create your marketing, because you can't just go one way anymore. So
yeah. Well, we talked about Carlos Gill prior to the show, and I know Carlos. He's a real good guy, and he often talks about how people don't want to see ads on social, but again, where that fits into your feed, you can drive growth, and it's part of that bigger strategy, not just one or the other. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you want to do a little bit of both on social. Yes.
And you got to test.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a hard thing, especially with small businesses, to get them to understand, is that you really got to test it.
Well, the most important thing, well, not the most important, but one of the most important things that people have got to understand more and more is the phrase data-driven marketing really takes the guess out of so much of the work that people have been doing. And so when you test, looking at data to understand what's actually performing and converting, it is a hard thing for a lot of people. It may sound easy, but it's hard for a lot of people to not rely on what they've been doing for 10 years on Facebook or 1 year on a campaign, but really understanding that what's converting and what's up, what the data is showing you to optimize is really telling you a better journey story than you had before.
Absolutely. You've got one more subject, and I do want to talk about it. And we didn't talk ahead of time about this. So I'm really interested in, you said, clearing up mixed messages.
Yeah. So this happens all the time. And I've had a lot of conversations about this last 2 weeks, anecdotally, at work. And this is something that a book will be coming on this at some point. But I'm speaking at Content Marketing World about the confused buyer always says no. It's a phrase that I've used for years. It's a phrase that often sort of resorts back to sales and customer service as well. But when you think about the messaging that you put out, whether it's your content, your ads, in any form or fashion, if it's a social media post, it is very often that content and that what you're saying in that messaging does not reflect either what you deliver, what the price of the actual item is. And I'll make it a easy, tangible example. But we have Mark Schaefer talks about content shock. People have been rushing to put out so much content that they haven't really figured out the alignment of that content to really fix that customer's problem. To me, it's been a flood of having words out there, so that Google can crawl it and drive some traffic back. But then you get back, and either you go to the e-commerce section of the page because you're so interested in that pretty story that your brand told. You either go to the e-commerce section to convert, fill out a form, buy something online, or you call a call center, which is still, what so many people still do for complex purchases. They've got to call into whether it's insurance or something in home services, and it doesn't reflect. And this happens all the time. I've listened to, I can't tell you how many recordings of phone calls where the customer is talking to somebody at the call center. And I'm going to bring up a ridiculous example, but it's not too far. I'm just different numbers. Is they see an ad for $99.95, and that's what drives them to buy. They're interested in that price. It was better than the other price that was listed above it. But then when they call into the call center, they tell them that actual ad was for 50% off if you get this, that, or the other. And then it's actually a price of $129.95. I'm not thinking through the example, so just I think it makes sense.
Right.
But it happens all the time. And so a lot of that messaging that you put out on the front end doesn't reflect what the back end is. And so it confuses people and it drives people away from buying and converting all the time. Now, another example would be what you see in a blog post drives them to a landing page where they might convert or fill out a form. Then that messaging doesn't match. And so it's a frustrating thing. It's frustrating as trying to find a phone number for something
Right.
where you're drawn in by either an advertisement or a piece of content or a social post in any form or fashion of those drives you somewhere. And then that mixed messaging doesn't reflect either it's the hours of operation, the price of the product or service, or something else, and it drives traffic away. And it may sound very minor, but I can tell you from looking at conversions where people start searching, if you use tools like, say, Crazy Egg or Hotjar, you watch people where they're on the landing page and they really convert over trying to figure out where the price didn't match, or
Right.
listen to phone calls from call centers. It is crazy to see how often that does not match. And it's something that people don't really think about from a total sales enablement, marketing, messaging, alignment problem. And it's honestly, it's a real problem, even more so today, because you have people disjointed that can't get together and meet unless they're on their 400th Zoom call of the week.
Right.
And then that becomes it's just a problem. It's not buttoning up. It's not dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's.
Well, and you see this in all of life when you're talking about your business. I mean, the term marketing, right?
Yeah.
And your sales team and your marketing team are on two totally different pages.
Absolutely.
And that can't happen. You've got to come together. The sales team and the marketing team have to come together, at least in some shape that doesn't confuse the customer.
Yeah, they start to focus more on attribution, who gets more spin, who gets more credit, than actually focusing on the customer who doesn't care about your sales and marketing team.
Right.
They
Exactly.
care about fixing their problem, not yours. And so
Exactly.
it becomes a hard thing for anybody at the C-suite. And I've managed a company before. It's a hard thing to fix. It's not easy. Each of these things have different needs, different silo needs, especially with channels. But your customer doesn't care. They're focused on fixing their own problem, and that's it. And so
Right.
you've got to align a lot of your marketing, your advertising, your sales messaging, what your customer service says in reflection. It can make so much more of this communion of those groups work so much better to keep customers, not just attract them first in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I
And now we've
completely
got
agree.
technologies to do that. The fact that I can go watch recorded screen time or listen to phone calls all the time with these great players like Invoca, for example, that will, you can figure out where the call came from and then record the calls as well in a data compliant manner, of course.
Right.
But the fact that you can look at that now is not a data compliance issue. It is we've got to figure out how to get, our business more aligned. And again, where small businesses succeed is when they listen. When they stop listening and start scaling strictly towards a sales message. I get it. It's a tough year, but you'll lose customers more quickly. It's kind of like that price versus cost conversation we had earlier. It may, the price may be cheaper now, but it'll cost you a lot more to not listen to this messaging later.
Yes. Yeah. And I think right now, honestly, it's a tough year, but it's also a time where you can stop for a minute and listen. You can do that instead of pushing. And I think it's something we're seeing more with our customers, that our clients, that they are listening more. They're paying attention more, and they're going back to their roots. What got us here in the first place?
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
think that's really huge. So, all right. So I need to figure out, hold on, I have lost myself here. There you go. How do people get in touch with you if they want to listen to you?
Yeah, easiest place is to go to asharksperspective.com. They can contact me there. Find me on LinkedIn. It's Kenneth Kenney. You'll see some sharks somewhere, anywhere you find me. You can find me at AI Media Group. But the easiest way might even be just send me an email to Kenneth, Kenneth, at asharksperspective.com.
That's awesome. All right. Before you go, I want to tell everybody what we've got coming up. Wednesday, we're going to talk about financial fitness for entrepreneurs, because you get into this, you get really excited about growing a business, and oftentimes we forget that part of it. Because I mean, I will make a confession. I've made this a couple of times, but I had about 8 months in, I realized I hadn't billed people in months because I was so busy taking care of my clients that I wasn't taking care of myself. I had to call. I called Lakia, and who is a person I know, and I said, "Can you just start invoicing people for me because I don't know what to do?" And then Anastasia came in and said, "Why don't we just charge them on an automatic basis, Anne?" It's a whole new thing for me. So that fiscal fitness for entrepreneurs is huge. We're going to talk about that. I want to remind you to subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and that helps us out. We are a small business as well. And again, we started, Kenny, you may not know this, we started this podcast by accident. The whole idea behind it was we're a digital marketing agency, and I was afraid when COVID came, I was so terrified for my clients. How do I get them in front of more people without costing them more money? And I thought, I can interview them. I have a lot of followers on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Why don't I interview them? So I simply invited them on, started doing this, interviewed them, and then I started getting people from across the country and across the world on the show to talk. So we are a small business. Come and help us out. We would love you to subscribe to us wherever we are. Have a look at our website, see if there's something we can do for you. And again, help the people who come on the show. So go and subscribe to A Shark's Perspective. I don't know if you know this either. I listen to you while I walk. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Whenever I walk, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm carrying Kenny along on my head.
You must be sleepwalking then. So
no, I love it. And you've got great guests.
I've been very blessed to have, you, but I've had Seth Godin, Guy Kawasaki, Neil Patel a few times, Joe Polizzi, and Ann Hanley. I've been,
love her.
Yeah. I mean, I've had so many amazing, Carlos Gill, we mentioned, Martin Lindstrom's one of my favorite marketers on the planet, Jay Baer. I mean, I've had, pretty much all of them. So I've been
is amazing.
Very blessed.
Yeah. So go and subscribe to Kenny's A Shark's Perspective as well. Kenneth, I'm so sorry.
No, but I will tell you, I have listened to quite a few of your own episodes. Look, as fast as I talk, because I have ADHD and OCD, that's just me. I will tell you, I listen to this show a lot. I'm a subject matter learner. I talk about a lot of the subjects I get passionate about, and I don't have any conceit, I promise. I learn as much from you as I do from every other marketer I've talked to. So it's why we connected 2 years ago, and glad to listen, and thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're tuning in. Like I said, It was an accident, but it's been really a fun accident. So yeah. All right. You stick around, Kenny, and everybody else, I will see you Wednesday morning. Kenneth, I'm so sorry. I did it again. It's your last name that keeps getting me.
I know.
Kenneth Kenney. I do. You know what? I'm just going to, before we go, tell me what your parents were thinking when Kenneth Kenney.
Well, it's so my dad's name. I have 3 first names, Clark Kenneth Kenney. They called me Kenneth. My dad had Clark Kenney, no middle name, couldn't afford it. My grandfather was Kenneth Kenney, no middle name, again, couldn't afford it. So I don't know why, and that's why I go by Shark. So
it's great. It's I was trying to remember there was a kid I went to school with who was David Davis.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I struggled all the time with his name. So it's not a surprise, but thank you so much for coming on. Everybody else, I'll see you Wednesday. Hopefully we're going to be up in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. So hopefully we'll have service up there. That's the plan. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Mahalo.